Coming up, George Finney joins us to talk about the illusion of perfect security, why we don't need magic wands, and how to have better cyber hygiene by looking at habits. We got tips on getting out of useless meetings and how you can actually get more done in the limited amount of time that you have, and some updates on the next IPO and how that's looking, as well as any of the other insights we got on the week and the state of security. So there's a lot we're going to cover today. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by... Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 85. It's Monday, May 14th, 2018. We're recording it live. I don't know if we can record it not live, so I don't know why I bothered to say that. What's cool about episode 85 is I've got a reference later on to one of the earlier episodes, like 14 or 15 that we did. So Paul and I have been at this a long time, and our goal here is to explore the business of security so we can better improve the security of business. It's looking at one to inform the other. We want to be your trusted source on looking at leadership, communication, and innovation in the state of security. So this is something all of us need, and we want to bring it to you. I'm Michael Santarcangelo, your straight-talking guide to overcome friction, translate your value into understanding, and get the results you wanted with better performance. And join me from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island is the ever dapper and fantastic host, Paul Asadorian.
Michael, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here doing the show. I'm excited. I'm excited to just sit around, kick it old school and just have good conversations. So
it's almost as exciting as being in person with you in Boston last week.
That's right. And I don't think we can. We did have dinner. But
I was gonna say we can't talk about it.
All we know
is that despite having 4 kids, I'm not as subtle as I'd like to think I am. I think that was the big lesson from the night is don't count on me for subtlety.
Yes. It was a good time. We were at Source Boston. I feel like I didn't until dinner. I feel like I didn't get as much quality time with you, Michael, as we normally get at conferences. It was kind of crazy. I got these glasses. It's one of the reasons I wore them, Michael, to remind everyone. And I will plug the vendor because I thought it was such a cool and innovative giveaway. I'm not sure what it cost them. I really would like to follow up and kind of see what these things cost. But these are like knockoff gunners. I don't know if any of you guys or gals, there you go, Michael's got a matching pair. And if any of you guys or gals in the audience wear gunners, I mean, if you wear regular glasses, you can get them tinted with this, but it basically just makes the screen brighter and easier to read, which I found as I got into my 40s was increasingly important. And this was a free giveaway. It's actually branded on the side with the sponsor, Ativo Networks, and I thought it was a fantastic giveaway. It's a great conversation starter because I still feel like these glasses are like people that work in technology overwhelmingly like, oh, what are those? Like it's not like everyone that sits in a cubicle is wearing these glasses yet. I feel like it's on the cusp of that. So I thought it was a cool giveaway to be like, oh, what do they do? How does it work? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, I'm going to add a dimension to it too.
You wear it all the time, right? And so your logo is on the person's glasses all the time. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, and there's another element to it too. And what they do is they filter out the blue light. So if you're at a computer screen all day and you find you're always rubbing your eyes, they filter out the blue light. So you get that lack of fatigue, which is a fantastic benefit. But there's another benefit. blue light is what disrupts our melatonin, which is how we generate the chemical to go to sleep at night. So a lot of places, if you start really looking at our health, it'll say, no blue light after 7 o'clock at night. Okay, well, good luck with that, because that's really tough. And so what happens is a lot of people will say once it gets to be about dusk time, you put on your amber glasses and you start blocking it. So very much similar to gunner's glasses. I used to use them a lot when I was doing more triathlons. I know I look like it today, but it makes everything crisper and faster.
Crisper.
Not sure why it matters, but it looked cool, so that's what we did. So lots of stuff there, and we got some more updates, and we'll talk about Source when we get to the next segment. But I'm really excited to introduce to everybody George Finney. I got introduced to George through Sean Tuma. So Sean's both helped out now co-hosting and did a couple of those fantastic segments. And George and Sean had gone to lunch, and Sean sent me a note and said, "I've got to introduce you to this guy. You're gonna love him." And I think George and I we try to talk regularly. I just realized we're a little behind, but absolutely brilliant. Been fascinating. We've done some work together. George is an author. I'm actually fascinated about a bunch of things. So George is an author. George is a pretty accomplished speaker. He's built a fantastic team. You hear me talk a lot about influence without authority. That's a concept George and I have kicked around quite a bit. And he's recently been, well, I say recently, George, if I got that wrong, we'll correct it. But he's been looking at habits and how to better instill habits and cyber hygiene and things that we can do and make a difference on. And I said, well, gosh, you got to come talk to us about that. And then we got talking about all the prep and the ways he did it. So I could gush about George all day, but George is a CISO at SMU. He's doing some fantastic stuff and trying to improve the industry. Welcome, finally, to Business Security Weekly, George.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here.
It is my pleasure. All right, so let's do this, because a lot of times when we there's so much that I want to dive into, and just to kind of remind us and everybody else. So I want to talk to George. He's got a great article out on the illusion of perfect security. I want to talk about the process of writing the book, how it's gone since then, and then how that's all shifted and evolved into the 9 cybersecurity habits. That said, George, how did you end up in security, and where does law school fit into security for you? And then how do you end up as a CISO? What's your journey been like?
So when I finished college, I was a liberal arts major. So no technology experience background at all. I started out working for GTE back before they were Verizon, and I got this kind of kick in the pants to go do some interesting stuff with technology, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. Went to a couple of different startups, and through my experiences there, I got interested in open source software. That got me interested in the law, understanding how contracts work. And through that process, I started work at SMU to work here during the day and go to the law school at night. And SMU is just a great place to be. They made me an offer to keep me around after law school. And the intersection between cybersecurity and the law is kind of a tight fit. There aren't a lot of CISOs out there that are also attorneys. A handful here and there. I've probably met maybe 10 over the course of the last decade, but it's been an interesting trip. So I love technology. I kind of geek out at things like open source. I've rewritten codes for some open source software projects. I've been a network engineer for a long time. I've done a lot of different things, sysadmin hats, but gosh, being a CISO is so interesting. I think it's intellectually challenging, it's stimulating, and it helps that helps keep me energized every day with exploring something, going down a rabbit hole to figure something out, or just connecting with someone in a different way. I get a lot of energy out of it.
I love that. Now, so in your role then, because this is something, and Paul and I have chatted about this a little bit too, you've got a pretty interesting role. I mean, it wasn't just, for all of us, there wasn't an option to go get a degree in security. It was, get a degree and kind of figure out. A lot of us have wound our way here. All of the things that you've done feels like you should be pretty conversant with a lot of different folks and actually understand something from their experience. Has that been the way it's unfolded for you? And then do you think that that's valuable? So if somebody looking to be a CISO today might need to be a little bit broader and perhaps a little less deep.
I think there's this element of specialization in cybersecurity that exists today that wasn't the case maybe 10 years ago. So, typically when you look at a cybersecurity person, you see, a background, maybe in defense, maybe they came up through networking or telecommunications, maybe they came up through the Unix Linux side, but over that course of time, maybe they got interested in something, but they also still had that big picture, right? So a Linux sysadmin knows how operating systems work, whether or not they've got a degree in it. They came up and, but they had the big picture. Today, kids coming out of college, their first job is going to be at a SOC. And, their first experience is going to be working tickets all day long. And I think that specialization is a problem. I think it's going to become a problem for CISOs as well. There's kind of this divide of, folks. You can be a CISO with a MBA today. That's cool. You're really business focused. You understand and can talk to business folks in the right way, or maybe you've come up through the technology ranks, got your MBA, and that's how you're going to be a CISO. But I think that's still a challenge, right? We've seen the transition from CISOs reporting to the CIO, where there's a really strong technology connection, and I think there's still 50% or more of CISOs reporting to CIOs out there. But the challenge is, once you move beyond that, how do you make those connections with your CFO or with your legal affairs office or risk or internal audit or any business department head whose processes you might be recommending updating or changing. So, gosh, it's such a it's such a broad spectrum. I think being able to build relationships is probably the biggest key in being a CISO. But absolutely, it's table stakes to have a great security operations group. And if you don't have that, you can't build those relationships inside IT. So I think you have to be able to do both.
We look at it on the show all the time. There's a hefty balance of things we need to be able to do. But you've done it well. Let's talk about your book. No more magic wands. What was the genesis of this? Like, some of the other folks we've talked to have written books. Some think about writing books. Some think, oh, no, not me. So did you always have the desire to write, or was this born out of a frustration or an opportunity? Set us up, and what will people get when they read the book?
So I've always been a writer. I've been writing since high school. But after law school, I made a kind of a concerted effort to really focus on my writing. I took some writing classes, went to some writing conferences, workshops, got better and better. Well, hopefully. But writing the book, actually, the genesis came from I got the opportunity to teach a class for undergrads here, kind of an intro to cybersecurity course. And what I found was the kids who had no background, maybe they're from the art school or maybe they're from the business school, they don't have a background in technology. So, teaching them some kind of rigorous technology concepts like encryption, I didn't like the way, we approach that from such a technical perspective. So, I finished teaching the class and I decided, hey, well, I think there's a market here, right? When we write security books, we generally market them to security people, which is a fairly limited audience. What if we increase that audience to just any layperson? And there's this whole genre of professional development books out there written for managers, whether you're in sales or accounting. So the No More Magic Wands is kind of like a Who Moved My Cheese for cybersecurity professionals, but it carries over for folks who are, in executive positions, and kind of conveys some of those lessons that you need to learn, and kind of brings them to the business. So the main character isn't a security person; she's a business elf. It's a kind of a case study in a business that makes magic wands that gets hacked, and it's staffed by all fairy tale creatures. But it makes it approachable in a way that a technical compliance guide just wouldn't be approachable to a layperson. And I think in order to get better at security, we need to reach out to folks who we wouldn't have thought to partner with before. And I think opening that up will help us get better at security overall.
George, I have a question about writing. I took a job where writing was a significant portion of my job, and I quickly realized that I had no idea how to write. And I really thought, and I think a lot of people are in this very same situation today, and that is I can pass a spelling check and a grammar check, and it's technically accurate. So if I can check those 3 boxes, like my writing's good. Like I'm good and I can put it out there. And of course, I realized a whole bunch of things about writing once I was doing it semi-professionally. But above and beyond those 3 things, which are obviously important, like what advice do you have for people that when they write in that way, other people look at it and go, wow, you're like that writing is terrible. Like what is it about writing that goes beyond those fundamentals that us as nerds are like, spelling's good, grammar's good, and technically accurate. Like I'm good, yay.
Right. I remember my first year in college, I was almost kicked out because I was kind of a bad writer. And, I'd been in journalism in high school. I thought I'd learned to write well. But as it turns out, I wrote well one way, which was for a certain kind of article. So, maybe I think mastering all different kinds of writing is a key skill, right? You maybe need to be persuasive in some situations, whereas, in a root cause analysis document, you don't. Maybe in a policy or in an incident response plan, it has to be written so that, a person in the 7th grade can understand it. And structure, I think structure is a big key. This might be surprising, but in law school, they teach you again a new style of writing. But the focus, even in law school, is on making writing simpler. So shorter sentences, just active voice instead of using passive voice. Those kinds of things make writing that much easier to read. And I think the feedback I keep getting about my writing. It's not just, he's this great writer. It's you took a really complicated concept, and I probably made it even more complicated with all of the references or stuff I added. But somehow I told a story and I simplified it so that anyone could understand it, right? So the advice I give people is pretend you're writing for your mom or your grandma. And would they understand it, and would they be moved by it? And I think that's a good standard to hold yourself to.
Well, and it was one of the lessons I learned early on as well. My sentences were too verbose and more like I spoke, and that took some retraining. And I'm not sure, like in school, depending on where you go to school, you may learn one method or the other. But I think let's talk about technical writing. I'm writing a blog post to communicate to maybe a more technical audience or communicate a technical topic to a wider audience. I think your advice of having your sentences shorter, more concise, very action-oriented is extremely important. And in fact, my editorial team where I worked, who was fantastic, that was one of the first lessons they taught me. They're like, you don't need all these extra words in there. Like, shorten down, what's your point kind of thing. And that was super helpful.
Totally. I think it's easy to want to look like you're make yourself look smarter, or use bigger words, break out the thesaurus. That's the opposite advice of what you should actually be doing.
Well, and so as a good example of that, you penned an article for the Forbes Technology Council, The Illusion of Perfect Cybersecurity. I put the link up in the show notes. This was delightful. So just Paul, when he talks about structure and making it all short, it's easy to read. But George, you also talked about making examples. You open up with a great quote from Helen Keller, and then you give a story, and you say, you kind of execute all those things. What was the response to this overall?
I would say this article in particular. I've written a couple of articles for Forbes, a couple of articles for Security Roundtable, or just my blog or whatever. But that illusion of perfect cybersecurity is one of the most read articles I've had. So I mean, it's kind of mind blowing a little bit. But the secret is I kind of have a formula for writing. I like to start off with something relatable, whether it's a movie or a quote or something. But I try and take that from an unexpected angle, right? So if I'm writing about perfect security using a quote by Helen Keller, not cybersecurity related at all, but also maybe a little inspirational, right? If
Yep.
you can overcome being deaf or blind or disabled or whatever, if you can relate that back to how we can get better at security, I think that really resonates with people, and I think hopefully it's inspiring people to look at security a different way and make changes as a result of that.
Again, it's a great article, and I really think people should go read it. I'm going to see if this works as a setup. I'm going to pull one line out of it that I really liked, and we'll see if I can transition us to the 9 cybersecurity habits you got. But this is a quote direct from your thing. Rather than attempting to create perfect security, let's instead think of ourselves as daring adventurers being driven by our imperfections. Short, artful, witty. I like it. How does that get us to the cybersecurity habits? Like, to me, because I know you, that says a lot about your approach and the way that you reach out to people. So whether that works or not, 9 cybersecurity habits, give us some of the background on the genesis of this, if you would, please.
So I'll just give a little bit of credit to my wife. She's got a quote. I don't know that she knows that she's quoting Voltaire, but she says, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." And I think we have this tendency in security to always go for the entirely perfect, 100% great,
Yep.
and we need to take steps to get there. So again, as I was thinking about security for the layperson, so it all starts with a New Year's resolution. So my New Year's resolution last year was to do a little bit more security writing and actually start a blog. But I started with this premise that security isn't a skill. It's not a competency that you can just give to someone. It's a behavior. And as a behavior, security works more like not just a single habit, but a collection of multiple habits. So what I did is I compiled this database of all of the security advice we give to people, whether it's don't write your password down, don't leave your password on a sticky note under your keyboard or whatever, and I tried to classify them into categories. So if those tips are examples of what we expect in terms of habits, then maybe we can generalize and come up with a framework or a pedagogy, if you will, for how we think we can train security people to change their habits, to change their behaviors, and actually come out with real security change. So this one thing that I'm particularly passionate about, and the reason that I'm writing in this area is I think we're making progress in terms of security technology like never before, and the things that we're doing in terms of automation or AI are amazing, and not to say that that isn't needed or isn't progressing, but we're at a standstill when it comes to improving how people behave. So in security we say people, processing, technology, but what we're saying today is just technology, not people so much. People are the weakest link. We've almost written them off, and why we've done that? Well, maybe they're irrational, maybe they're unpredictable, but I think people are predictably irrational, and I think we need to understand that. And if we somehow can change the way we do security training with that in mind, I think we can have we can get rid of well, maybe we'll never be able to get rid of saying that people are the weakest link, but I think we can make progress. And again, taking that quote you read, we don't have to make people perfect, but I think we can make them a lot better. Even if we only make a 20 or 30% improvement in how they interact with the world around them, that will be a massive shift in terms of where we're at in terms of people getting breached or identity theft or whatever else, social engineering that you can think of.
Well, what I like about this too is that you're breaking it down in a way that lets us fundamentally change the conversations that we're having, which I really enjoy. Now, you did something in order to prepare for this when you were getting ready to first present this as a keynote, and you hired a presentation coach, a speaking coach. Tell us about what drove that decision and what you learned in the process. I mean, high level, what you learned.
So at a super high level, I'm kind of self-conscious about how often I say So, people like the way I talk generally. They think that I'm smart. That's great. But I would always get this feedback. You kind of said a little too much. I haven't been keeping track of how much I'm saying by the way, in this interview. But I thought, okay, well, let me go, talk to a speech coach and, run this 9 Habits presentation by her and, see what, she'll come up with. So I did what everybody does on the internet today to find a speech coach. I went on Yelp and I found this great coach. She's got 40 years experience as a speech coach, speech therapist. And I think it was really, it was really mind blowing. I'd gone to, public speaking classes in the past before, different employers have sponsored that. But it's very different to sit down with a speech coach and work on a specific speech. So, generally, you go to Toastmasters and, they'll ring that little bell if you say, and eventually you're conditioned to not want to say, anymore. And that's great. But I wanted to go a step further and see if I could, get some habits or figure out how to speak better. I mean, one of the things that was extremely helpful for me was, don't try and memorize your speech. What we're not going to do is, tell you some specific things you have to do, but let's teach you how to practice doing it. Mm-hmm. So the standard advice is, stand in front of a mirror and give your speech and just do it repetitively until you have it down. Her advice was a little different, and I'm paraphrasing her a little bit, but her advice was, if you're taking someone on a tour of campus, for example, you're going to know where the highlights of that tour are. You're going to know some history about each one of those places that you're going to stop on that tour, and think of your speech in terms of showing people this wonderful world that you've created. And as you walk through those places, you might see in the audience something that maybe something is more interesting over on this side of campus rather than the other. So, instead of, walking, by the water fountain that day that you're going to point out, maybe, you're going to show them the library. And I think thinking of a speech in terms of that, sure, I did the practice, the preparation. You want to learn how to make eye contact with people in the crowd and feel comfortable doing that. Another generic piece of advice that people get when they're giving a speech is, scan the crowd so that, you're making, and that doesn't work. What works is, making direct eye contact with someone for several seconds and then moving on and making direct eye contact again, but not in, a rigorous fashion. You make it feel natural.
not so much intensity, right?
Yeah, not in a creepy way. I try not to be creepy.
That's actually what I was thinking, Paul. And then I thought, all right, let me choose a different word as we do it.
A lot of what George is saying too, I've learned in where my speaking coaches largely are SANS instructors, and I always ask the top-ranking instructors from the SANS Institute who spend 6 days multiple times a year teaching for 8 hours a day, or there's breaks in there, right? But they've logged a ton of hours speaking, and they're scored very rigorously. And you hit on quite a few things, George, that they've told me over the years. Make eye contact with different people in the audience. Avoid using not just but they call them filler words, because you can get out of your habits, but then if you're not careful, you'll replace it with some other kind of filler word or sound, and that's equally as bad, if not worse. So, all of that advice is definitely stuff I've learned. And in going to classes and when you practice, I think that's another thing too. Not just to go in front of a mirror, but I think practice is logging hours in front of people. And I try and do that today with my own talks. I definitely find a smaller venue that maybe I'll give my speech first, and then if they make a recording, that's great. I can analyze it. Of course, I can analyze my own speech by going and listening to my own podcast, which I do occasionally as well, and I think that's another important piece of advice. I'm not sure if you have the same advice, but anytime you have an opportunity to listen to yourself give a presentation, you can hear all those things and take notes and continually improve.
The first time I gave my 9 Habits speech, I gave it here at SMU as a part of Security Awareness Month. And, we had a whole security fair, and it was a big thing. We partnered with HR to get it. There were probably 300 people that showed up to the fair itself, but 2 people showed up to my talk. So it was a perfect chance to rehearse, get a little, interaction going. I now record every talk that I give on my phone, even if it's just an audio recording and not a video. But to go back after that first time, I was terrible in front of those 2 people. But that gave me enough to work on, where I could see, okay, here's where I need to work. Here's how I need to practice a little better. I take notes. I tweak the presentation every time I give it. My hope is by the end of the year, I'll be able to do a TED Talk on the 9 habits. And
that's awesome.
Build an hour down into 18 minutes. That's going to be a real challenge. But I think, again, challenging yourself to keep thinking about it differently and keep distilling it down to find that message is really key.
No, I think that's well said. I want to point something out too, as we've been talking about it. First thing is I've definitely picked up that we needed a new segment. George, we started improving our programming here. I hope we're improving it, and we're looking at things people want to do. Based on listening to you to talk about that, I think we have a segment or more where we're going to talk about what is it really like to prep for a talk, for an internal presentation, for a whatever, because there's so many tips there and more we can do. So we'll come back to that. The other thing, Paul and I had this very conversation last week at Source Boston. And I said, how many times when you've created your keynote or presentation have you delivered it more than once? And Paul gave me that look. I get a lot, which I had a lot, which is why would I do that once I gave it? We're done, right? And I think a lot of the conferences perpetuate that. Have you ever given this before? Oh, well, if so, I don't want you here.
Yeah.
They got to knock that out, because George just said something that's really important. If I keep giving it and I get better at it and I figure out all the pieces of it, then I can turn it into a TED Talk. Then think about the analogy of campus tours. I can do all this different stuff with it. And that's what Paul and I got talking about last week a little bit, was think about how much more powerful it is. You get better at the segues. You get better at the examples. You've edited it down. It might be the 4th, 5th, 10th, 50th time you've delivered it. With that audience, it's still the first time they're hearing it. And I think that's massively important. Let's do this too. The 9 cybersecurity habits. So George, because we're about to run out of time here, George has already said that anybody, if you're a security leader and you want to talk about this and how he's rolling it out, he's happy to chat with you about it. And then I said, cool, how do we do that and not get too many people who should be contacting George in the process? So here's what we worked out. Send me a note. I'll forward. I'll introduce you right to George, and then you'll have it. So that way we're not giving out his contact details, so his phone doesn't ring off the hook too much. But if you want to talk about it, so the other thing is we'll bring George back to do a segment on the 9 cybersecurity habits. Set it up for us briefly, though, George. What are the 9 habits? What should people think about this? How is it benefiting you? Kind of sell it to us for the next time.
So. Again, the high level security is a behavior, not a competency. So it's a discipline, right? You have to practice it every day, just like a habit. It takes 21 days to make a new habit. First habit, literacy. You have to be able to get information about security and have a source for constantly getting new information. But once you learn to read, you've got to not believe everything you read. So the second habit is skepticism. Each habit builds on the last. Once you start to be skeptical of things, you need to apply that skepticism in a directed fashion, and we call that vigilance. You move from vigilance to the habit of secrecy, right? You need to be able to know what you're protecting in order to protect it. The next habit I've changed. I used to call it hygiene, which changing your password. There's a little bit of semantic baggage that I think goes along with hygiene, so we're calling it culture now, and I think that has a more comfortable tone. But again, what's the culture of your environment? The things that you do every day or every week or every month when it comes to security. Then diligence, right? You need a plan for coordinating all of those routines or hygiene behaviors into a coordinated response. And this is kind of the critical point in the 9 habits. A lot of people do the first 6 or so. The next one is federation. Again, name change. You can call it community, but there's only so much you can do on your own. You can be the biggest, strongest caveman in the world, but you've got to sleep, for at least a third of the day. You need to have a community in order to protect yourselves, and this is, federation is I think one of the key things that has allowed our society or culture to grow, is that community protection. Once you start sharing information with the community, the habit of mirroring comes in, because you need to know what you're sharing with those other people. You need to know what you look like to them. So we give the advice, Google yourself, or view your social media profile from an outsider's perspective. And then finally, the last habit is deception. So you've got to work in ways of defeating social engineering or other types of things, and deception is that habit, but it's one of the most difficult ones to master or to build a habit around.
The way my brain's processing, and so I'll look forward to this next conversation. I've already thought about how different organizations can implement a more localized version of this, but how it really, I love the work you've done distilling it down, thinking about it, breaking it up into categories. So those are the 9 cybersecurity habits. And that's essentially what George and I started talking about to come on the program. And then he wrote the other stuff, and there was so much there to talk about. And I really hope that what that shows a lot of other security leaders out there is there are other approaches. I mean, you're at higher ed, and one of the things you and I've talked about is the ability to influence without direct authority. You can't just go slam your fist on the table and tell them that's how it's going to be. There are different approaches, and you're pioneering them. You're certainly leading a lot of those. And so I really appreciate you taking the time, and we will have you back to go deeper into these 9 cybersecurity habits and how people can use them and position them. If anybody dying to talk to you in the meantime, send me a note, and I will happily connect you. And we'll look forward to more. So thanks for appearing with us. We're going to take a quick break, which is a good chance you can go to securityweekly.com and you can check out our shows. We have 7 different programs now to cover a lot of the different things we're trying to solve in the security industry. And you can check out our on-demand content. When we come back, we're going to get you some free time by showing you how you can get out all those meetings that are wasting your time.